Chava being created number 2 and second, in the sense of being created with somebody already in the world, her natural disposition is to need somebody else. She was created with somebody else already here. Something interesting when you look at like families, there are, oldest child, like you can spot an oldest child, a middle child, and a youngest child. It's not because anyone kind of put numbers on their back, but it's because they naturally, where they are in the family will determine some of their characteristics, because as much as we are influenced by our personality, we're influenced by our environment. So for like an oldest children usually are very independent because they were born first. There was no other older siblings to influence them. Most of the time they are much more comfortable playing by themselves, being alone, because in a way, when it comes to the children and the dynamic, they were the ones that had no one there. So they were number 1. Middle children have the dynamic of having to have, they have a good example of older siblings. They have those to lean on. And then they have the younger the younger ones to lean on. Middle children feel a little bit sandwiched in the middle. You can always tell when there's a middle child. And then there's the youngest, and youngest children are pampered and spoiled, and they usually they don't have to do, like the older children usually carry the weight. An interesting fact I had with one of my children, with my youngest, was he didn't speak till he was 2. And it was something that I was really concerned about. So I went to the doctor, took him to the doctor, and then we had somebody assess him, and the assessment came back and said, well, he has no need to speak because everything is done for him in the household, that even before he opens his mouth, somebody already is doing the thing he needs. So all he has to do is make a sound and it's done. Like somebody will give him what he wants, reaches out his hand, and somebody gives him what he wants. He doesn't even have to use his words. So if there's no element of having to use his words because he's accommodated, then he doesn't need to speak. So the problem wasn't that he physically could not speak. It was just that in his disposition or his where he was in the family, he just didn't need that. So that was such an interesting component where obviously we had to go in and start communicating with him and giving him, instead of giving him what he wanted, we had to wait for him to speak. Now, if you see this child, he doesn't stop talking. So it's an interesting dynamic. So back to the Adam and Chava thing. So Chava was brought into the world second. She was brought into the world second. She was created second. Now, what that did was it created a sense of her needing somebody else because Adam was already there. So when we think of the concept of neediness, of needing, for a lot of us, we think of it as a negative. We think, oh, if I'm needy, I need, it's a negative. But if we think about our role as women, there's another component. So the component of men come into this world as in they are the purpose of this world. They come in and they're the tafkid. As women, we are the Shekhinah. We come here voluntarily. We come here to assist a man in his experience. A man has his purpose, but as women, we are connected to the Shekhinah. And if we think about the Shekhinah itself, the Shekhinah in itself is a light. It's this light, it's the spiritual element that is charged. It has it's an energy frequency. And as women, that's our natural disposition. So for a man, they need that guidance and that light from the woman itself. But for us to be able to actually access that, we need a sense of neediness. And if you think about women in general, like what we are able to accomplish in the world, a lot of what we get to accomplish in the world comes from a sense of thinking, I need, right? So it's not always a negative. Women need stuff. Women need stuff. We need things. We always need. And sometimes it can feel overwhelming, but it's the only way anything gets done. So the thing is that when we lean into our masculine, we think about the frequency of needing and we lean into the results. So it's like, I need the house clean. I need my fridge cleaned. I need to shop, whatever it is. I need Shabbos done. What we end up doing is focusing on, I need it done. We focus on the final product rather than, and when we do that, we are leaning more into our masculine. When we lean more into our feminine, we lean into the frequency of what needs to happen, the energy in itself, rather than the final product. So how that would look would be to naturally know that, first of all, that sense of neediness comes with the sense that we came second, that we are not alone, that we always need somebody and something else, which is the way Hashem created us. So that is something to celebrate. And rather than look at it as like an addict, right? It's not about looking for your next fix, but rather honing in on that energy. That's where we can really succeed in doing what we need to do. So for most of us, when we think about our energy and that disposition, we try to minimize ourselves. We say, oh, I'm needy, and I try to shrink. Oh, I should need less. I should budget more, right? When it comes to your energy frequency, you shouldn't budget. Maybe on the results you should budget, in the sense that don't focus so much on the results and focus more on that opening that portal and that abundance within. So we're gonna do a little exercise. I want you each to take a thought or two of things that you feel you need that shame might be connected to. In the book Eastern Body, Western Mind, she talks about that usually people that aren't connected spiritually, or people that have difficulty just in general with spirituality, the reason they have that is because of shame. So they're not able to connect with the spiritual part of who they are, because when we talk about, there's religion as in the religious practice, and then there's the frequency of spirituality, of being able to believe and connect to higher self, to that warmth, to the Shekhinah within. When we see that there's a deficiency of spirituality in somebody's practice, like a deficiency in a vitamin, a lot of times that comes from an element of shame. And when we think about that, it's usually, we don't naturally shame ourselves with other people without other people kind of doing that first. So it's usually an influence of something around them that internally they're feeling shame. So how that really applies to this topic is that when we are feeling shame, right? If we're feeling shame about the neediness, or thinking about something that you really feel or believe that you need, and you're feeling shame around it, what we are doing is we are restricting, right? We're kind of restricting that spiritual access, which is such a vital part to understand, that if we are, as women, spiritual beings, right? When we're the Shekhinah itself, that is the essence of who we are, and we are cutting ourselves off to our source, we're going to have a very, very difficult time in general trying to actually get to our goals or sit in our authenticity. So when we're going into this visualization, just notice if there's any shame around this piece of whatever it is that you need. Okay, so we're going to do a little meditation, and we're going to just take one or two to just notice what comes up. Let's get into it. So leaning back into the chair, dropping the shoulders, begin to inhale through the nose, fill the belly with breath, and just notice even as you begin to think about this need of yours, notice if it makes it difficult to breathe into this space, which even for me personally right now, it is a little bit more challenging. So just relax into that space. So I want you to communicate to your body now that we're going to isolate the need first. So there's the topic, right? The focus of what the need is. And then just notice how we connect to the need itself. So I want you to lean into the need, the sense of neediness. And notice that this sense of neediness is the reason that you've gotten a lot of things done in life. This sense of neediness is your access to your femininity. And what happens if, rather than leaning into the topic itself, you just notice, acknowledge, I need, and just whatever that you fill in the blank, recognize that and celebrate it. And rather than leaning into it, lean back and allow that energy to communicate with you. Inhale through the nose and softly exhale through the mouth. And ask yourself, what if that neediness was something to celebrate? What if you had permission to generate more neediness? Now, we're not acting on it. We are observing. It's an observation, right? Because we are in the space of, just like with a meditation, it's not about the action. The second we go into the action of it, we are going into more of a masculine space. Just leaning into the feminine of the energy itself. Inhale through the nose. Exhale through the mouth. And like interior design, it's important to get to know this disposition, know this temperature, and know that it's a good thing. Know that it has purpose. And it is such a big part of the foundation of who we become and where we go and why we do what we do. So if I say to you now, with that need, we have the goal is to get there, right? Wherever that is, notice if there's any restriction related to it. And the way we know that there is restriction related to it is because for most of us, I can say this for myself, is there's a restriction of breath that comes in as I think about this thing. So if I'm in a space of restraint, if I'm in a place where I'm restricting myself, right? If there's tension connected to what my need is, the math won't add up. And that's crazy. So for me to be able to get there, to get to where I really need to go, there needs to be an element of softening as often as I can, and gently leaning into that frequency and knowing that rather than focusing on the goal, I need to work on creating access within myself through that form of needing. And knowing that I need to need, that's the element. It's just needing is one of the pillars of who I am. So now ask yourself, if we're going to push this specific need a little further, if I said to you, not only are you able to get what you think or what you're thinking you want and need, what if you doubled that desire? What if you doubled, if I told you the capacity is not where you capped it, you can have double. Whatever that is, you can have it in abundance. And the only thing you need to do is softly relax into yourself. Find that fire within. And just sit within the need itself, the neediness itself, rather than the goal. Notice if the opportunity can become a lot more tangible. Because what's happening then is we're sitting in the energy. We're not sitting in restrictive energy, right? Because thinking I need, like even if you watch a child, I need, and he stamps his feet and he tightens his fists. I need, and the shoulders come together. And that in itself is, sometimes we come to that person with the thing, and I say to you, okay, you can have it. And the problem is because there's so much restriction there is no place to even receive it. So have any of you ever been in a space where you've been wanting or needing something for so long, and then you finally get it, and it is harder to accept than you thought? A really simple one would be, if any of you have ever fasted, at the end of the fast, we dream about food a whole day, and we get to that end of the fast, and to actually consume the food is harder than we thought, because when the body is in a deficiency of sorts, to be able to acclimate to a new environment, we need to move slow. We need to adapt slowly. And for some people, they experience low blood pressure or dehydration in those elements. So these components really connect to this topic, where when we are thinking about the thing that we need most, or the thing that we need, if we sit in the frequency of the energy itself, then when that thing arrives, it's like, do you want it, or do you just dream about the idea?